Hello, church. So here is our next daily devotional. We took a break for VBS and then a couple days while I was doing some things up at the lake. But we are back on this July 1st, 2026, as we prepare for a very hot one. I went ahead and did the summer cut. So my head is ready if I'm not bodily ready for any for that massive heat index and triple digit feel like and all that kind of good stuff. Check on your neighbors. Don't forget about those pets. Make sure everybody's doing good. So today we begin into what is sometimes called Song of Solomon. The title you're going to hear ascribed in the New Interpreter's Bible is Song of Songs, and we'll get into that a little bit before. But this is our introduction. I'm going to be first introducing you to the person who is writing our introduction, commentary, and reflection on Song of Songs, and her name is Renita J. Weems. This is somebody who, one, is still living, which I don't always get because the New Interpreters is an older resource. It was also one of the authors that I remember reading as a part of my Old Testament studies when I was at Lancaster. So she was already an established name at that point. Did a commentary in the Women's Bible Commentary that I think we used for one of my Old Testament classes. Renita J. Weems is a Reverend Doctor. In 1989, she received her PhD in Old Testament Studies from Princeton Theological Seminary and Princeton Divinity School for that part of the program, making her the first African-American woman to get a degree in Old Testament studies. She is unflinching in her commentary. This book that would normally just make me uncomfortable reading and sharing with you, she is going to be very frank with, but am looking forward to it because of that reason. I shared when we started Ecclesiastes that's always been one of the books that especially when I was doing like reading the Bible through in a year, that was one of the books that I'll get to. And it was just like, oh my gosh. So, just heavy. Having some time to break apart the sections and through the eyes of another, gaining a deeper appreciation for this piece that was really kind of unusual for a lot of our biblical experience and reading was a neat thing, and I hope that's going to be true for Song of Songs for me as well. At the time of the NIB, the Renita Weems was the let me look because I'm going to say the wrong title. Yeah. The Associate Professor of Hebrew Bible, the Divinity School, Vanderbilt University. Vanderbilt is in Nashville, Tennessee, and still a very well-respected biblical program. In addition to the commentary on the Song of Songs for the Women's Bible Commentary, her publications include Battered Love, Marriage, Sex, and Violence in the Hebrew Prophets. If you've read some of the prophets, that makes a little sense. And Just a Sister Away, a womanist vision on women's relationships in the Bible. She is now serving as dean at Gannon Theological School, which was a new one on me. That's in Atlanta, Georgia. And yeah, like I said, good to have somebody that I've read in seminary still living and writing and with us and everything. She does a beautiful job with the introduction to Song of Songs. I'm not going to be reading the entire opening portion that has several pieces. I think, like with Ecclesiastes, we're probably going to be doing several days of introduction just to set the table for us as we get ready. And Weems shares. The content of Song of Songs, sometimes referred to as the Song of Solomon, represents a remarkable departure from that of other books in the Bible. To open the pages of this brief volume of poetry is to leave the world of exceptional heroism, tribal conflict, political disputes, royal intrigue, religious reforms, and divine judgment, and to enter the world of domestic relations, private sentiments, and interpersonal discourse. Filled with language of sensuality, longing, intimacy, playfulness, and human affection, Song of Songs introduces the reader to the non-public world of ancient Israel. The relationships are private, the conversation is between intimates, and the language hints of kinship bonds. E.g., mother, sister, brother, daughter. At last, readers of Scripture have the opportunity to focus not so much on the external politics that organized and dominated the lives of Hebrew people, palace intrigue, temple politics, prophetic conflict, international doom, natural disasters, but on the internal systems and attitudes that also shape the lives of the people of Israel. So, approaching it as this book about relationships and interpersonal relationships in this language. Now, here's the tricky parts. Song of Songs stands out in sharp contrast to the rest of the biblical books in two other ways. First, nowhere in its 8 chapters is God mentioned. We'll do a little mic drop there. The book of Esther is the only other piece of biblical literature that shares this distinction. Although the religious significance of the latter, of Esther, is frequently debated as well, its religious significance is a little more self-evident, referring as it does to the rituals of fasting and prayer and to the celebration of the Feast of Purim. A decidedly secular tone permeates Song of Songs. Not only is God's name not mentioned in the book, but no allusions are made to any of Israel's sacred religious traditions, be they covenant traditions, Davidic or Sinai covenants, or God's saving acts in Israel's history, like deliverance at the sea. We'll pause there for a minute before I get into the second point. I've very heard it over the course of my studies that for a lot of Old Testament folks, they're of the mindset that Song of Songs is a love poem, and it was largely included because the early Christian church continued to be included in the canon because the early Christian church was approaching it as a person's love for God, or more specifically and more in a Christian context, the love of Christ for his bride and the bride for Christ. But that's a Christian perspective looking back on it. Now, so we got our first thing. Doesn't mention God. Just a little thing. Second, Song of Songs is the only biblical book in which a female voice predominates. In fact, the protagonist's voice in Song of Songs is the only unmediated female voice in all of Scripture. Elsewhere, women's perspectives are rehearsed through the voice of narrators, presumably male, like in Esther and Ruth, and their contributions are overshadowed by male heroism and assorted male-identified dramas. But in Song of Songs, where more than 56 verses are ascribed to a female speaker compared to the man's 36, the experiences, thoughts, imagination, emotions, and words of this anonymous black-skinned woman are central to the book's unfolding. Moreover, the protagonist is not merely verbal. Unlike many of the women in the Bible, she is assertive, uninhibited, and unabashed about her desires. And yes, you heard right, black-skinned woman. Why that comes up, if you have not read Song of Songs before, you will discover as we do our study. Now skip down a little bit. As meditations of a woman's heart, Song of Songs might have been viewed as the feminine counterpoint to a book like, say, Ecclesiastes. And the latter, an unnamed speaker, who is most likely male, reflects on the chasm between traditional wisdom teachings and actual human experience. He does not hesitate to express profound disdain for traditional wisdom, arguing that even the best of life is plagued with transience, unpredictability, absurdity, vanity, and ultimately ends in death. And he is openly cynical about the contradictions he has observed in life, one being that good deeds do not always lead to good consequences. In the light of the patent limitation of human wisdom, and in the face of death and vanity, the preacher, or the quester for Peterson, or the teacher for the NRSV, repeatedly urges his audience to indulge themselves in life's few genuine pleasures: food, drink, love, work, and play as gifts of God. One might argue that the protagonist in Song of Songs accepts the author of Ecclesiastes' invitation and revels in the joys of nature, work, and play when one is alive. When one is in love. In its own way, Song of Songs meditates, among other things, on traditional thinking about female sexuality and a certain protagonist's life experiences as a woman in love. Speaking in the first person, as does the protagonist in Ecclesiastes, the woman allows herself a few outbursts of impatience and effrontery, making it very clear that she is well aware that her own words and actions violate traditional teachings pertaining to womanhood and modesty. In the end, she is as impatient with traditional wisdom as her male counterpart in Ecclesiastes is scornful. Oh, it's going to be fun. This is also a good time for me to remind you of something that I have quoted more often than I thought I would when we were doing Proverbs, which was my mother's story of telling her middle school children, going from 6th to 8th and then working her way back down, telling them, I apologize in advance for the I just lost the word. It wasn't dirty parts. That probably just got word. I apologize in advance for any offensive language or, yeah. All right. I've got to talk to my mom. We'll get that phrase back into my head because we're going to be there. We're going to be living there in that space for these 8 chapters of Song of Songs. All right. Wish you all a wonderful July as we get this month started. We'll be back with you tomorrow with some more introduction from Weems, and we will see you then. Blessings. Take care.